Okay, let's unpack this. If you were asked to point to, the most important stretch of ocean on Earth, you might pick the Mediterranean or maybe the South China Sea.
Sure, those are the obvious ones.
But the sources you've shared with us, they make a very, very strong case for the cold, vast, and, well, often forgotten Bering Sea.
That's it, exactly.
When most people hear that name, they picture freezing water, maybe a king crab boat battling these massive waves, and a map separating Alaska from Russia. They just think remote.
They think of it as a dead-end, icy frontier, an edge of the world. But the truth is, this marginal sea of the Northern Pacific is a staggering global engine.
An engine. I like that.
It really is. It's a geographical crossroads where continents literally met. It's an astonishingly productive biological system and, of course, a multi-billion-dollar financial powerhouse, all rolled into one.
It's a vital region whose importance is, well, it's just grossly understated on the world stage.
Yeah.
So our mission in this deep dive is to use the provided sources to move beyond those surface-level facts. We're going to really meticulously explore the historical, the geological, the biological facets of the Bering Sea.
To understand not just its profound global significance, how it shaped human history.
Exactly, but also the dramatic and, frankly, alarming systemic changes it is currently undergoing.
Exactly. Our goal is to give you, the listener, a deep and thorough understanding of the key drivers, the unbelievable scale of its biodiversity, and the huge economic stakes that rely entirely on the health of this unique ecosystem.
So let's start with the sheer scale, because this isn't a small bay or a local strait.
I know.
We're talking about one of the world's truly massive seas.
We absolutely are. The Bering Sea forms, along with the Bering Strait, the definitive and often, politically tense divide between the two largest landmasses on Earth.
Eurasia and the Americas.
Eurasia, so that is the Russian Far East and the Americas, specifically the United States. And formally, it is identified as a marginal sea of the Northern Pacific Ocean. It's separated from the Gulf of Alaska by the Alaska Peninsula.
And its name is a direct nod to the history of exploration, right? It traces back to the Age of Discovery in the North Pacific.
It is. It's named after Vitus Bering, a Danish-born Russian navigator who, in 1728, performed the first systematic European exploration of the area.
And he famously sailed north from the Pacific.
He did. He demonstrated a passage into the Arctic Ocean. That was a truly monumental feat of navigation at the time.
Just to appreciate the theater for that feat, you really need to understand the scale.
You do. The surface area of the Bering Sea covers over 2 million square kilometers.
2 million.
Or, for context, that's roughly 770,000 square miles.
That's larger than many major countries.
Yeah.
And its borders are just defined by these colossal land masses.
Yes. It's bordered on the east and northeast by Alaska, and then on the west by the Russian Far East, specifically the Kamchatka Peninsula. The southern border is dictated by that long arc of the Alaska Peninsula and the rugged Aleutian Island chain.
And in the far north?
The far north, that's the narrow passage, the Bering Strait, which connects it to the Arctic Ocean's Chukchi Sea.
And there's one specific region we need to keep in mind, right?
Yeah.
Especially when we get to the economics.
Bristol Bay, yes. The massive section nestled between the Alaska Peninsula and Cape Newnham on mainland southwest Alaska. Absolutely critical.
Okay, that sets the geographical stage beautifully. Now, let's pivot to what made this region famous thousands and thousands of years ago, because before it was this cold, watery divide, it was actually a massive, walkable connection.
A highway.
This brings us to the first major theme of our deep dive, the crossroads of continents and extreme events. It's hard to stand on the shore of the Bering Sea today and just imagine walking across it, but that's exactly what our sources tell us happened, and not just once, but repeatedly during various glacial periods.
It's almost impossible to get your head around, isn't it? The scientific consensus is that during the most recent major ice age, vast quantities of global seawater were locked up in these massive continental ice sheets.
Which caused sea levels worldwide to just plummet.
We're talking by over 100 meters. And that drop, that was the key. When the sea level fell, it exposed a huge swath of continental shelf, creating the famous Bering Land Bridge.
Sometimes referred to by its scientific name.
Beringia. And Beringia wasn't some narrow choke point. It was a vast expanse of land that existed for millennia, connecting Siberia and Alaska.
And the crucial implication here, which really fundamentally reshaped global human geography is that this bridge served as the first point of entry for the early human populations
The ancestors of today's indigenous people.
who were migrating east from Asia into North America. I mean, it's the foundational concept for understanding how the Americas were populated.
It is. The initial migration wave is believed to have moved across this land bridge roughly, 15,000 to 18,000 years ago? And they were likely following migratory animal routes.
And you have to imagine the environment they faced. It wasn't some lush paradise.
Not at all. It was a harsh, frigid, treeless tundra. It was likely kept relatively ice-free because of low precipitation, what we'd call a cold steppe.
So navigating that landscape, even without crossing water, was an immense human challenge.
Yeah, huge challenge.
And as you mentioned, it wasn't a one-way street for just humans. The sources confirm this bridge was a superhighway for animals in general.
Absolutely. Other large animals, the megafauna of the Pleistocene era, so you're thinking mammoths, bison, horses, they used this bridge to migrate in both directions.
Both directions.
It was a critical filter and conduit for life, allowing species from the old world to cross into the new world and vice versa. It was this massive, dynamic interchange zone, active for tens of thousands of years. The very ecosystem of North America was shaped by what walked across Beringia.
That's the surface history. But what about the deep, violent history of the ground beneath this massive sea? We need to go even deeper, literally, into the geology of the deep ocean, because this area is defined by monumental, ancient tectonic forces.
Yeah, if we look at the geological timescale, this is where the history gets really interesting. Our sources reveal that a small, fragmented portion of an ancient tectonic plate, known as the Kula Plate, is found beneath the Bering Sea.
The Kula Plate.
And this small remnant, it's a smoking gun. It points to an incredibly violent past.
What's the significance of the Kula Plate? I mean, it's not one of the major plates we hear about today.
No, because it has largely been consumed. It was a massive primary plate that dominated the North Pacific millions of years ago. Its significance lies in the process of subduction.
Okay.
The Kula Plate used to actively plunge beneath the North American continent, right under Alaska. Subduction is essentially one giant slab of crust diving underneath another, and it is the most powerful force in geology, period.
So the very existence of the Bering Sea's deepest features is a result of this ancient, ongoing tectonic collision.
Precisely. As the Kula Plate subducted, it dragged the ocean floor downward, creating the deep basins within the Bering Sea. But more importantly, this process of sinking crust melting and rising up again that fueled the creation of the massive volcanic arc we know as the Aleutian Islands.
The Aleutian Chain.
And the Aleutian Trench, which is the deepest part of the Bering Sea region, is the direct scar of this ancient subduction zone. This tectonic violence is why the Aleutian Chain is so rugged, so volatile, and marked by frequent, powerful earthquakes and active volcanoes. It's a literal tectonic war zone, even today.
That provides incredible context for the geography. Now, let's return to the surface, bring it into the modern era, and formally define the limits of this sea again. We need to move from the historical bridge to the formal, contemporary boundaries used by international bodies.
Right, so the International Hydrographic Organization, the IO, they've defined the precise southern limit of the Bering Sea, which is critical for maritime law, and it's a very specific line.
What's the definition?
It runs from Kabuk Point in the Alaskan Peninsula, moves westward through the entire Aleutian Island chain, connects to the southern extremes of the Russian Komandorsky Islands, and then finally joins Cape Kamchatka in Siberia.
That seems straightforward enough. You've got U.S. waters, you've got Russian waters. But jurisdiction, especially right in the center, that's where the political boundary of the sea gets really complicated.
It does.
And this brings us back to the term you mentioned, the donut hole.
The donut hole. It's a fascinating and crucial piece of international policy. While the Bering Sea ecosystem is managed by two nations, the U.S. and Russia, who claim resources up to 200 nautical miles from their shores under their exclusive economic zones, or EEZ,
Right.
there is a massive circular area right in the exact center of the sea.
And this area is geographically isolated from both of those EEZs. So why is this a problem?
Because it is, by definition, international high seas. It's separate from both U.S. and Russian jurisdiction. The nickname donut hole describes it perfectly. A pocket of ungoverned water surrounded by these heavily regulated zones.
And that status must have created immense management challenges.
Oh, huge regulatory failures, especially back in the 1970s and 1980s.
So what happened historically in that unregulated space?
The lack of unified management led to a classic tragedy of the common scenario. Fishing fleets from various nations, Japan, Poland, South Korea, China, recognized no national quota applied there, and they just descended upon the donut hole.
What were they targeting?
They primarily targeted the highly valuable pollock stock, a key fish species in the Bering Sea. They essentially fished the stock into near collapse in that area, completely ignoring the fact that these pollock migrated freely between the unregulated central zone and the protected U.S. and Russian zones.
So unregulated fishing in the international zone was devastating the fish stocks that were supposed to be protected by the U.S. and Russia.
Exactly. The overfishing in the donut hole was so intense that it collapsed the pollock fishery there. This environmental crisis actually forced international action.
So it had a positive outcome eventually.
It did. It led to the negotiation of the Convention on the Conservation and Management of Pollock Resources in the Central Bering Sea. This effectively created a moratorium on high seas fishing in the donut hole until stocks recovered, showing that eventually, the need for ecosystem health transcended immediate national greed.
That's a powerful lesson in global cooperation, stemming from ecological necessity. We've covered history, deep geology, and international law. Now, for a fact, that is, well, literally out of this world.
Right.
Linking the vast energy of deep-time geological forces to sudden celestial intervention.
If the tectonic plates demonstrate massive energy over millennia, the Bering Sea is also susceptible to sudden, dramatic, high-energy events, even from outside the planet.
I wouldn't typically link the Bering Sea with outer space, but the sources detail a truly incredible event that happened relatively recently.
Yeah, on December 18, 2018, the United States military detected a massive meteor explosion high above the Bering Sea. Because of the remoteness of the location, it was largely unnoticed by the public and civilian scientists for months.
And the scale of this explosion was not trivial.
Far from it. This object entered the atmosphere and disintegrated at an altitude of just 25.6 kilometers, releasing an estimated 49 kilotons of energy.
49 kilotons. To put that into perspective for our listeners.
The atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, which ended World War II, was estimated at 15 kilotons. This meteor explosion was more than 3 times as powerful.
More than 3 times as powerful.
Yeah.
That is an enormous amount of power released in the atmosphere. And the fact that it occurred over this specific, highly sensitive body of water and went undetected by most of the world, it's just a wild footnote.
It really is.
It just reinforces this image of the Bering Sea as a profound, often dramatic energy zone, shaped by every force, from subduction to solar system debris. Now that we've grounded ourselves in the deep history and geology, let's talk about the engine that makes this sea so biologically powerful. We're moving now to the Greenbelt machine geography and ecosystem drivers.
Okay.
First, let's set the scene with the islands and the incredible underwater landscape.
The Bering Sea is really defined by its island groups, which are vital ecological stepping stones and often protected wildlife refuges. On the U.S. side, we have the Pribilof Islands, which includes St. Paul Island, famous for its fur seal colonies.
Right.
We also have St. Lawrence Island, Nunivak Island, St. Matthew Island, King Island, Sledge Island, and Hagemeister Island.
And the Russian side, besides the mainland, has its own crucial outpost as well.
Yes, most notably the Komandorsky Islands, which include Bering Island. And then, right in the middle of the narrowest point of the strait, you find the Diomede Islands, separated only by the international dateline.
And these islands are not just rocks in the ocean.
Oh, not at all. They are essential breeding grounds and seasonal hauling out spots for literally millions of marine mammals and seabirds.
Beyond the islands, we mentioned the large coastal features, the Bering Strait, Bristol Bay, the Gulf of Anadyr, Norton Sound. But it's the submerged topography that I found most shocking. It's hard to grasp the sheer scale of the underwater features here.
That's because the flat, shallow continental shelf, which covers the eastern half of the sea, suddenly gives way to the deep, complex geology of the western half. The floor of the Bering Sea is carved by 16 massive submarine canyons.
16?
And if we're talking about scale, the centerpiece of this submerged landscape is Zemchug Canyon. Our sources confirm this is the largest submarine canyon in the entire world.
The largest globally. Can you give us some context on its size? I mean, how massive are we talking?
Zemchug is immense. It's roughly 105 kilometers wide at its mouth, and its relief, that's the depth difference between the canyon rim and its floor, is staggering.
How deep?
Up to 2,600 meters in some places. That is deeper than the Grand Canyon. It's a gigantic V-shaped trench carved into the continental slope.
which tells us immediately that this isn't a gently sloping seabed.
No, it's a dramatic topography that acts as a colossal funnel for water flow.
And that funneling, that dynamic topography, leads directly to the core concept of the Bering Sea's phenomenal biological output, the shelf break.
Correct. The Bering Sea shelf break is the single dominant driver of primary productivity here. It is the reason the sea can sustain a billion-dollar fishery. This zone, where the relatively shallower continental shelf suddenly drops into the abyssal depths of the North Aleutians Basin, it's so productive, it's earned a nickname.
The green belt.
The green belt.
The green belt implies intense growth. So what is the specific mechanism, the hidden machinery, that turns this drop-off into a massive ecological engine?
It's a continuous physical process called nutrient upwelling. And the topography of the canyons like Zemchug helps guide it. The cold, deep Aleutian Basin waters, which are incredibly dense and packed with nitrates and phosphates from decaying organisms that have sunk.
All the good stuff from the bottom.
All the fertilizer, exactly. It's pushed up the slope by deep currents, wind stress, and tidal action.
So the deep water is essentially bringing fertilizer from the bottom of the ocean up into the zone where sunlight can actually reach it.
That's it perfectly. When this deep, nutrient-dense water hits the shallower shelf waters, it mixes vigorously in the sunlight zone. This allows phytoplankton, the microscopic base of the entire food web, to constantly photosynthesize and reproduce.
So it's a constant supply.
It ensures continuous, vigorous production. It prevents the surface waters from becoming nutrient depleted, which is what happens in most stable open ocean environments. The green belt is effectively a perpetual fertilization machine that feeds the entire food chain, from krill up to the largest whales.
That explains the constant nutrient supply. But there's a second major driver of productivity, and it comes from the freezing climate itself.
Yeah.
Seasonal sea ice. You'd think ice would suppress life, but here it turns out it's an accelerator.
It is the second main engine, and it's critical for triggering the massive spring phytoplankton bloom. It works through two distinct, complex hydrographic mechanisms.
Okay, let's start with the first mechanism, stratification.
When the massive seasonal sea ice cover melts in the spring, it causes a huge influx of low salinity, relatively fresh water onto the middle and outer shelf areas.
Right.
And since fresh water is less dense than salt water, this fresh layer floats on top of the dense, saltier ocean water below. This creates a distinct, stable surface layer, which we call stratification.
And how does that layered stability boost productivity?
Because the phytoplankton, the base of the food chain, are now trapped near the surface. The stratification prevents them from sinking into the dark, deep waters. It keeps them suspended in the photic zone where there is ample sunlight.
So it holds them in the sweet spot.
It effectively maximizes their exposure to light, leading to an explosive, short-duration spring bloom that injects colossal amounts of energy into the ecosystem.
So the melting ice stabilizes the water layers, creating the perfect greenhouse for the phytoplankton. What about the second mechanism? You said there were two.
The second mechanism involves the ice itself acting as a habitat. The sources note that the ice is not merely floating water. It is a physical attachment substrate for the growth of specific types of life, known as interstitial ice algae.
Interstitial ice algae. If we zoom in on that idea of the ice as a structure, what are these unique algae doing there?
These are specialized diatoms and other algae that live inside the brine pockets of the sea ice structure itself. They can photosynthesize even under low light and temperature conditions.
Wow.
So when the ice finally breaks up and melts, these ice algae are released into the water column. They provide a critical early season food source for zooplankton, krill, and larval fish.
So it's like an appetizer before the main course.
It's a food injection that happens even before the main water column spring bloom is fully underway.
That's a beautiful synthesis. Two distinct, massive engines, the deep upwelling at the shelf break and the seasonal influence of the ice, both working together to generate this world-beating level of primary production.
And this immense, consistent energy supply is what sustains the spectacular biodiversity and, critically, the economic wealth we see today.
That constant feeding machine, the greenbelt, translates directly into our next section, Section 3, Biodiversity, Economic Wealth, and Warning Signs. When we talk about scale, this sea supports a biological caste that is almost unmatched globally. Let's start with the largest residents, the marine mammals.
The Bering Sea is a globally critical habitat for whales. It supports vast populations of beluga, humpback, bowhead, gray, and blue whales. They all migrate here to feed during the productive summer months.
But critically, it also supports some of the planet's most threatened species.
It does, and that's what makes it so important. Our sources highlight the vulnerable sperm whale, several endangered species like the fin whale and the sea whale. But the most pressing concern in the sources is the North Pacific right whale.
The right whale.
This species is cited as the rarest whale species in the world. The entire population, unfortunately, numbers potentially fewer than 30 individuals.
30 individuals, that's nothing.
It's on the absolute brink. The Bering Sea and adjacent waters are their last remaining stronghold. The loss of that single species would be a monumental tragedy.
It's just astonishing that this cold environment is home to such a high concentration of rare life.
And it's not just the large whales. Other key marine mammals that rely on the Bering Sea include massive numbers of walrus, the stellar sea lion, which is often considered a bellwether species for the health of the entire ecosystem.
A canary in the coal mine, so to speak.
Very much so. And also the northern fur seal, and in the northern areas near the ice edge, the mighty polar bear.
But if the whales are the marine royalty, the seabirds are the absolute overwhelming citizens. The scale of the bird population here is just astonishing, and it's proof of the vigor of this food chain.
It truly is the seabird capital of the world. Over 30 species of seabirds, totaling an estimated 20 million individuals, breed here.
20 million.
This density isn't an accident. It's proof that the foraging habitat is relentlessly rich, especially near those major underwater canyons we talked about.
Can you elaborate on the scale and give us some specific examples of where they congregate?
Well, we see tufted puffins, the endangered short-tailed albatross, the spectacled eider, and red-legged kittiwakes. The sources point out that the high productivity is especially concentrated along the shelf edge and near major submerged features like the Pribilof, Zemchug, and Pervanese canyons.
Because that's where the food is being churned up.
Exactly. These canyons force nutrients upward, creating predictable feeding zones. The scale is best demonstrated by the colonies of crested auklets on islands like the Pribilofs. These colonies can contain upwards of 1 million individuals.
1 million birds.
Densely packed onto the cliffs, all relying on the dense shoals of zooplankton that the greenbelt provides.
1 million individuals in one spot. That level of biological intensity just underscores how productive this ecosystem is when it's healthy. But that scale didn't save everything, did it? This intense interaction with humans who came seeking resources has had a severe, sobering cost.
It has. It is a profound historical tragedy documented in the sources. We have 2 Bering Sea species that were driven to complete extinction due to human overexploitation in a remarkably short period of time.
Who were the victims of that early resource extraction?
The most famous case is Steller's sea cow, Hydrodamallus digus. This was an immense marine mammal, a relative of the manatee, but living in these cold waters. It was estimated to be up to 9 meters long and weigh up to 10 metric tons.
A gentle giant.
It was. And tragically, it was first scientifically documented in 1741, and due to relentless hunting by Russian explorers for its meat and fat, it was driven extinct by 1768.
Just 27 years after discovery.
27 years. The speed of that loss is shocking. It is a stark lesson in the power of unchecked human greed.
And what was the other species?
The other lost species is the spectacled cormorant, Phelacrocorax perspicalis. It was a large, flightless seabird also driven to extinction due to ease of capture and overhunting.
And tragically, the sources confirm there were other losses too, driven not just by hunting, but by, well, carelessness.
Yes. The extinction of the Bering Canada goose, Branta canadensis asiatica, demonstrates a different type of cascade failure. This small subspecies was lost due to a combination of heavy overhunting and the devastating effect of introduced invasive species.
Right.
Specifically rats, which were brought by ships and ravaged the nests on their isolated island breeding grounds. The irony of such vigorous biodiversity collapsing so quickly under pressure is just heartbreaking.
That transition from pristine biodiversity to these sobering extinction events brings us directly to the modern economic reality of the Bering Sea. This is a seafood goldmine, and it supports commercial fishing operations that are vital to global markets.
The Bering Sea is world-renowned for its productive and profitable fisheries, sustaining a massive fleet. Our sources report at least 419 total fish species, with a commercial focus on high-value stocks like Pacific cod, various flatfish species, sablefish, Pacific salmon, and Pacific herring.
And of course, the high-value shellfish, which really dominate the media narrative.
That would be the red king crab and the snow crab. These 2 shellfish define the lucrative fishing industry here, and the sheer financial scale is what elevates this sea to global importance. Landings from Alaskan waters alone represent nearly half of the entire U.S. national catch of fish and shellfish.
Half of the entire national catch coming from essentially one marginal sea. That's an unbelievable centralization of economic activity. If we put a dollar figure on that, what is the annual cash flow that is dependent on the health of the greenbelt?
Commercial fishing is immensely lucrative. On the U.S. side, the commercial fisheries catch is valued at approximately $1 billion worth of seafood annually.
$1 billion a year.
And on the Russian side, the Bering Sea fisheries are valued at around $600 million annually. So we're talking about a $1.6 billion industry, totally reliant on the physical process of upwelling and stratification that we discussed earlier.
That connection is highly visible to the public. The sea is the central dramatic location for the Alaskan king crab and snow crab seasons, famously chronicled on the television program Deadliest Catch.
Right.
It brings the extreme danger, the unpredictable climate, and the massive financial stakes of this region into millions of homes globally.
It does, but those financial stakes are currently shadowed by signs of severe systemic decline. The sources present evidence suggesting that great changes, driven by environmental shifts, have already occurred in the Bering Sea ecosystem, moving it away from its historical high productivity.
What is the hard evidence backing up these great changes?
Well, one early warning signal was a major climate anomaly in 1997, known as the warm water event. That temperature spike resulted in a massive bloom of a specific type of phytoplankton called a coccolithophorid. And the crucial finding from researchers was that these were low-energy phytoplankton. They are essentially less nutritious compared to the typical large fatty diatoms that usually dominate the greenbelt.
So the ecosystem was still producing life, but it was swapping high-quality, energy-dense fuel for low-quality fuel, like junk food.
Precisely. It was a clear shift in quality. But what about the overall quantity of life? This brings us to the truly brilliant aha moment from the research you shared, the isotopic evidence. This provides a long-term historical view that we rarely get in oceanography.
How exactly did scientists get a historical data log from the deep past of the sea? This sounds amazing.
They examined the long record of carbon isotopes found in historical samples of bowhead whale baleen.
In the whale itself?
Yes. Think of the whale's baleen, which it uses to filter feed, like a tree ring or a geological core sample. Every year, new baleen layers grow, capturing the chemical fingerprint of the food supply that was available that season.
That's amazing. The whale's physical structure acts as a biological archive. And since carbon isotopes reflect the primary production trends of the phytoplankton at the base of the food chain,
those baleen samples essentially give us a multi-decade archive of the ecosystem's health.
That's exactly right. By comparing the isotopic ratios in the older, deeper layers of the baleen to the newer layers, scientists could map the health of the greenbelt over the last 50 years.
And the results were alarming.
What did this long-term record conclude about the foundational energy source?
The trends in these carbon isotope ratios suggest a dramatic and undeniable decline in the efficiency of the greenbelt machine. The conclusion is that a 30 to 40% decline in average seminal primary productivity has occurred over the last 50 years.
30 to 40%. That's an almost unimaginable collapse in the foundational energy source for cod, for salmon, and for that $1.6 billion crab and pollock fishery. What does lower carrying capacity functionally mean for future quotas and the communities that rely on them?
The implication is profound, and it's immediate. If the ecosystem is generating 30 to 40% less food at the base of the web, every single creature up the chain, from zooplankton to the most valuable red king crab, must compete for a shrinking energy budget.
Less food to go around.
It means less energy for growth, fewer successful reproductive cycles, and ultimately smaller populations. The overall carrying capacity of the Bering Sea, the maximum size of the animal populations it can sustainably support, is now much, much lower than it has been historically. This isn't a future problem. This decline is the present-day context for fishery management.
That scientific revelation about the carrying capacity, that the core engine is running at 60 or 70% capacity, that sets up our final segment, the future and cultural legacy. If the sea is already under that much biological strain, what does the future look like in the context of global climate change?
The evolution of the Bering Sea's climate and its ecosystem is intensely uncertain, especially given the catastrophic rates of change occurring across the entire Arctic region. The key driver here is the extent and duration of sea ice.
And the narrative we usually hear globally is one of universal accelerating ice loss. But the Bering Sea, in a strange twist of local meteorology, shows a distinct and specific contrast, doesn't it?
It does, and this is a critical nuance that challenges simplistic climate models. While the Arctic Ocean immediately to the north has suffered massive, substantial loss of summer sea ice, the ice cap is shrinking dramatically. The Bering Sea region, specifically documented between 1979 and 2012, actually experienced a small growth in its overall sea ice extent.
That's completely counterintuitive. Why would the Bering Sea behave differently from the rest of the Arctic?
Scientists believe this is due to local atmospheric circulation patterns, particularly the Aleutian low-pressure system. This system can, under certain conditions, draw cold air masses southward from Siberia, locally overpowering the general warming trend and temporarily stabilizing or even expanding the ice cover here.
But this local anomaly is just that, right? A local physical resistance. So we have the local physical boundary, the ice holding firm or even expanding for a time, but simultaneously, we have the evidence that the biological engine inside that boundary is collapsing, the 30 to 40% productivity decline. This seems like a recipe for immense instability.
It creates a very complex picture of stress. The decline in primary productivity, the food, suggests that even if the ice is physically present, the warmer water temperature and shifts in circulation patterns are disrupting the vital upwelling and stratification timing that defines the green belt.
So the machine is breaking down from the inside.
The physical ice boundary may be resilient, but the underlying biological mechanism is not. Understanding how these conflicting environmental pressures interact is the key to predicting the Bering Sea's immediate future.
While scientists are wrestling with those physical and biological realities, the sea itself has long captured the imagination of storytellers and influenced culture and media for well over a century. The isolation, the danger, the immense concentration of life. It makes for a powerful literary setting.
It has a very rich cultural legacy, often tied to themes of survival and the wild. One of the earliest examples is from Rudyard Kipling. A chapter in his classic work, The Jungle Book, is titled The White Seal, and the story is set primarily in the Bering Sea.
And the main character, Kodak, a rare white fur seal, is a perfect subject for that environment.
Precisely. It's a story of rarity, migration, and the constant threat of human exploitation, all set against the backdrop of the Pribilof Islands seal colonies. The story captures the immense scale of the sea's mammal populations while also highlighting their vulnerability.
And the Bering Sea often serves as a setting for modern drama, particularly those that focus on the climate or the sheer danger of the sea itself.
You see that in films like the 2015 thriller Harbinger Down. It involves a group of graduate students who book passage on a crabbing boat specifically to study the effects of global warming on a pod of beluga whales in the Bering Sea.
So even modern fiction is directly incorporating the climate threats we just discussed.
Absolutely.
It's a place that shapes people too, not just events.
That's reflected in the 1949 film Down to the Sea in Ships. In that story, a central character is actually given the name Bering, reflecting his birthplace aboard a ship crossing the treacherous sea. It's a literal baptism by that environment.
Tying a person's identity directly to the wild nature of the region.
Exact.
And finally, that specific image of isolation and danger makes it a prime location for mystery and thrillers.
That would be the 2002 supernatural thriller Ghost Ship. The premise involves a marine salvage crew operating in the vast, often treacherous Bering Sea, where they discover the lost Italian ocean liner, the Antonio Grazia, which had disappeared decades earlier.
The sea itself provides the vast, isolating, and dangerous stage.
It's the perfect setting to heighten the sense of mystery and terror.
This has been an extensive and detailed journey through the Bering Sea, moving from the ancient past to the uncertain future. Let's bring it back to the most memorable takeaways for you, the listener.
Well, we've established that the Bering Sea is far more than just a cold expanse. It is the physical location of the ancient Bering Land Bridge, the crucial historical crossroads that facilitated the peopling of the Americas and the migration of megafauna.
Deep underwater, it is defined by tectonic violence and is home to the world's largest submarine canyon, Zemchug. And its immense productivity is driven by that dynamic mixing at the shelf break, known as the green belt.
A green belt sustained by both nutrient upwelling and seasonal sea ice.
And this vigorous ecosystem sustains a staggering biodiversity, including the world's rarest whale, the North Pacific right whale.
And supports a multi-billion-dollar fishery worth about $1.6 billion annually between the U.S. and Russia, making it one of the most concentrated centers of economic activity in the North Pacific.
But most critically, this engine is sputtering. Scientific evidence? brilliantly derived from bowhead whale baleen, suggests that the average seasonal primary productivity has seen a dramatic, undeniable 30 to 40% decline over the last 50 years.
Which implies a significant permanent reduction in the sea's overall carrying capacity.
And that profound vulnerability leads us to a final provocative thought for you to consider, based on the conflicting data we explored about its future.
We know the Bering Sea ecosystem's foundational energy source is collapsing. Yet, for several decades, its physical boundary, the sea ice extent, showed a small local growth, pushing back against the larger global trend of warming.
So the question that remains for the policymakers, the scientists, and the fishing communities is this. If a polar marine ecosystem's external defenses are holding steady or even temporarily strengthening, but the internal biological engine is simultaneously running low on fuel, what does this imply about the true definition of resilience?
Is it possible for an ecosystem to appear robust on the surface while suffering a fatal energy starvation beneath? It's a question that demands a deep dive into tomorrow.